We'll let everyone kind of gather in here. We're going to start off kind of slow, get things introduced, and get the day rolling. First of all, thank you very much for attending. The weather obviously is on top of everyone's mind. I will assure you, Angie, our marketing director, has told me that the weather will be perfectly fine all day. So there's nothing anybody has to worry about. And that's probably as accurate as the meteorologist, so I would take that as is. Welcome to nVision 2015. Yes, I know it says 2013, but if we're planning for 2013 or even 2014, we're probably late to the game. So really today is about talking about the future, the technologies, the vendors, what are we doing? What's hot on people's minds, the topics that you guys have all, or many of you had actually responded to us with in a survey saying, tell us about these technologies. Well, we gathered them all here today, hopefully, or many of them. And you guys will have a chance to learn about them, hear what's going on, talk to peers, coworkers, colleagues. So thank you all for coming. We do have some housekeeping I want to cover right away this morning. Item number one, I want to express a big thank you to our marketing team. This was a lot of work and effort. The meteorologist did not work well with them, so our crowd's going to be about half. That being said, it was the same amount of work for them. So they have got a great day in store for us. Marketing and Emily and Angie, did I get your name right? Yeah. Angie and I work closely together. We got a great lunch planned. We have a great social at the end of the day. Everything is going to go well. So I appreciate that in advance, but I want to say thank you to them. And please, a round of applause for putting this all together. Okay, another thing, I don't know, how many people know what's going on up at the Dome today? Quick show of hands. So, okay, one person is aware that we have the Northern Ag Expo. So you guys have all chosen to come here instead of the Northern Ag Expo. And actually, that's a big deal. They have 192 booths. We have the second most in Fargo going on here today. So that's important. But I was assured, God, not even any humor today with these people, but I was assured, hold on, I should probably check my email to make sure that this actually happened. Make sure. Yes, it's true. We will have 100% of the candied bacon will be here at our social, not up there. So we will be good. Okay. God, this is a tough crowd, Ben. I'm telling you right now. There we go. Thank you for cooperating. By the way, that was actually on the list of requests for the show was candied bacon. So I thought we really accommodated people. Okay. Let's talk about the agenda. We are going to start off at 9 o'clock will be when we really kick things into gear. Then we will have Byron Snider speaking, giving a keynote. 10 o'clock, we will have Gary Inman giving a keynote. There will be a short break. And at 11 o'clock, Karen Hewitt will come up and give us a keynote. Lunch is going to be outside. We all went through all the tables or whatever. It will be at 12 o'clock. It is going to be a great lunch. I saw the menu. I'm already hungry for it. And then the afternoon, we are going to have breakouts. And obviously, you guys can all look through your agenda. Hopefully, you all got one, or you can get one out in the corridor there. There will be four different rooms going on with different topics in it. One will be here, and then the other ones are on the map. And we did this intentionally. I know there might be a few of you that won't be able to be two places at once, but the idea is that we wanted to get as much exposure, give you as many choices to see the vendors and see the technologies that you want to choose from. Also, we tried to accommodate all levels of people from a technology standpoint. There are many of you here today that are extremely technical, and there are many of you today that are at my level of technology where the TV remote is one step over my head. So hopefully you will find plenty to pick from and learn from the sessions you choose to go to, or at least be entertained. Okay. At this time, I do want to give a quick introduction. Mr. Carlsrud, Ben Carlsrud, is our president. I think he has a few words he'd like to say to our group this morning. Ben, the mic is yours.
Morning, everybody. My corneas have melted, so I can't see much. And Brad, you really are wordy. You covered, let's say, about 99% of the small things I was going to say. And so I just want to say thanks for everybody coming out, making it through the weather. I can guarantee if we didn't have this event right now, we probably would have had 6 more weeks of late fall, maybe early winter, and karma's got us going. Golf events go awry from time to time. But, I've been with the organization for a little over, well, not a little over, but coming up on about 17 years, and we've been doing these types of events for probably 10 of those, 11 of those. Things kind of get lost in the muck when you're kind of been around for a while. But this one, I think really by far stands out as one of the most progressively thinking, most future thinking as far as what we wanted to do with the event and kind of change things up. The keynotes this morning, 3 great individuals that are going to talk about what they're passionate about, what's driving them, maybe not necessarily from what their organization is doing, but what are they passionate about and what's going on in their life. We have a lot of folks from Network Center in the room. If you could all stand up, please. That way, if something strikes a tone, yes, Sean, I can actually see you. Rick, I can see you too. I was lying about the cornea thing. If you're looking to talk about something, interesting, or you see something at the breakout, track one of these guys down. I don't know how many technicians we actually have showing up because as things change, their lives are about taking care of what's important to you, your business. So if they're here, we'll try to get you hooked up if you got some questions. There's also the vendor booth, I think right on the other side of this wall. Make sure you swing through there if you can. How many are around? Several?
Just under 192.
192.
Just under 192.
Okay, so to the power of some degree, we have some really good vendors that are helping us out with this. They're going to be doing a number of breakouts, so make sure if you see something interesting, you jump into that. Other than that, I guess I can only say thank you and not cover the same thing Brad did. So I guess thanks for showing up. I don't know if and when the storm will actually happen, but I think 3-ish, so I guess we'll play that by ear to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. Maybe it'll be blue skies. I don't know how many times school has been canceled or 2 hours late, and you wake up in the morning wondering, why do I have to take care of my kids now because school people wanted time off? No disrespect against anybody that makes that decision in the building, but it can be a little... alcohol becomes consumed at that point in time. Anyway, thanks for showing up. I think kick it back to you. And
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. President. Yes. All right. A couple of other items. I've been told, I knew there was going to be some things I forgot. My phone's been buzzing. Angie's probably telling me some things here.
can't see it.
All right. For those of you who are interested in tweeting, you're supposed to use hashtag nVision 2013. And I believe we are giving away a prize. You'll go into a drawing if you are tweeting throughout the day for a Slate 7. If I win that, someone has to help me set that up. But, okay, and that will be given away at 3:50 this afternoon, along with all the other prizes. So vendors, could you give me a show of hands? How many have giveaways that they'll be giving away at the end of the day? I want to see a show of hands. Well, there's a few. All right, so all of that will be given away at the end of the day when we wrap things up and right before we go into the social. So if you can make it through that time, would be great. I do know there are some pretty good giveaway prizes. Also, let's go through these vendors real quick. So I think I've mentioned everybody that I talked to that the vendors are the ones that do make this possible. Their money, their presence, their knowledge, all of that is very much appreciated. Let me emphasize that again. Their money, their presence, and their knowledge is very much appreciated. So I do want to thank them all. We did things a little bit different. In the years past, many of us go to these conventions and these seminars, and the vendors come up here and they talk about their stuff, and that's great. Well, the effectiveness of that is definitely changing. So we challenged our vendors this year to really talk about the future, talk about the hot topics, the cloud, mobility, whitelisting, those types of things, and how their technologies play into those challenges that we're facing. And they've done a great job, and they've assured us that that's what we're going to learn about this afternoon. We're not just going to get the product puke. We're going to actually hear about what they're doing and what their companies are doing to invest in the future. So let's thank those vendors here. I want to name off. They're all in your book. And there's actually many of these. Most of them have booths next door, but not all of them. So Microsoft, obviously, they brought their toys with for us to all play with. So please stop by their booth if you get a chance. IBM, Exagrid, Parsec. The guys from Billings actually came in. I heard they might have had a few drinks too many last night. Where's Ferrucci at? Awesome, that's great. I like to see them having a good time in Fargo, spending their money here. VMware, ESET, Ring Central, Cisco, implementation specialist, Great Plains partner, is here with us today. Box. How many people are using cloud storage? Quick show of the hands. How many people are using storage in the cloud? How many people plan on using it in the next year? Wow, we have some shy people because I don't believe that. How many people have iTunes? iCloud? Oh yeah, there was a few more hands coming up. So we are using cloud storage, great. Shavlik, Moz 360 by FiberLink, Checkpoint, Zixcorp, Video Guidance. They're all here, or most of them are here today. Most of them have booths next door, and they all contributed to helping us pay for the lunches, pay for the meal, pay for the facility. So thank you. I'd like a quick round of applause for our vendors. All right. I think, see if Angie's going to let me get started 5 minutes early today. Oh, I think that was a thumbs up. Either that or I got a middle finger, but we're going to go with a thumbs up, I think, on that one. So, all right. Without any further ado, I'm going to kick into our first introduction here. So, how many people have shopped at Scheels in the last year? Wow. Now, nobody uses cloud storage, but everyone shops at Scheels. I see how that, Byron, that's a hands off, hats off to you. So, okay, I've known Byron for a couple of years now. I'm always enlightened when I sit down and meet with him. He challenges me regularly. We do get to talk a little hunting and fishing. Did we discuss deer? Who had the bigger deer this year? We didn't. That will be for lunch maybe. But okay, Byron Snider is going to give us the first keynote today. Byron has a very, very extensive background. IT, finance, and retail. And you put those three together, that is extremely challenging. And so I asked Byron if he could help us out today and talk to us about what's challenging him. And he said, I have a fun presentation for you. So I'm excited to have Byron here today. Byron, the stage is yours. Can we get a quick round of applause for Byron? Thank you.
Good morning. Apparently, I'm going to be a little bit of an echo, Brad. Thank you. So I'll have to start with, if we are going to talk about deer hunting this year, that I just told Mike that unfortunately I got a deer, but I did not shoot my rifle this year. So how you put those two together ends up for not a very good hunting story. So, well, thanks. I've been with Scheels 8 years. And as Brad said, I actually spent most of my time on the store side. So I spent the first 5 years on the stores. I was in St. Cloud, Minnesota as a full-time shop manager. So I sold product, primarily bikes and ski equipment. And then I became an assistant store leader, and I was an assistant manager for 2.5 years in St. Cloud. And then the opportunity came up to move to Reno. So I moved to Reno, and I was there for 2.5 years. And in that role, I was actually a store leader candidate. So I was training to become a store leader. And that was a very unique role because in that role, I was actually helping lead other assistant store leaders or assistant managers. And so I really had to learn and develop, well, what does it take to lead other people? While I was in that role, I interacted a lot more with the IT department. So as I go through this today, I don't pretend to have all the answers, nor do I pretend that I've got anything magical to say today. But what I'm hoping is that you'll get a couple nuggets out of my presentation this morning that you'll enjoy. So there is my Twitter account, I guess. I don't know if that's the right term. Interesting, you know, if we wanted to talk about one thing today, we could actually talk about Twitter, because when you talk about new things, it is super interesting. If you start to study and follow what's happening on Twitter, I would guarantee that most of us, 99% of us in this room, have no idea how Twitter is being used. But yet, when you look at that 15 to 20-year-old kid, it's all they use is Twitter. And so for retailers and others, you know, we really have to start figuring out, hey, what's going on Twitter? So kind of my little side note on Twitter there. I think we're up to a total of like 7 tweets this morning on Net Center Vision 2013. So we'll see if we break through the double-digit barrier. So I think it's really important that when we talk about how have we done at Scheels in IT, that my background has a huge play into that. And the reason that's important is for those 5 years that I was on the store side, I really was unhappy with the performance of IT, as well as the board was, and obviously that's what led to them saying, hey, we need somebody new to lead our IT department. The interesting thing about why was I unhappy with IT, well, it was a perception from somebody on the front lines. And really, I don't think it was based on a whole lot of facts. It was, well, IT doesn't get things done fast enough, right? We've all heard that all the time. And it was also that what IT's doing isn't really relative or relevant to what I'm doing today. The third thing for me personally that I was personally unhappy with about IT was our e-commerce site. And if any of you have shopped on Scheels.com 5 years ago, it was a pretty terrible experience. Like a lot of e-commerce sites, we started with, well, let's just have a brand page. And then somebody said, well, let's sell gift cards. And then somebody said, well, if we can sell gift cards, we can probably sell some product. And so what that really led to was a pretty poor web page and e-commerce experience for our customers. And so that was my whole perspective on IT. So when the board said, hey, we want somebody new, and I was in a meeting where they were discussing where do we want to take IT, I naively raised my hand and say, well, I can lead IT, even though I had absolutely no idea why IT was failing, nor did I have any idea how to make it better. One of the things that I really have felt changing for me personally in the last 6 months is how I think IT should be viewed within our company. And what I mean is, when I came in, we had a really poor customer service perspective with everybody that worked at Scheels. And a lot of that started with, if you asked us to do something, our first answer was always no, right? And I think that's pretty typical in IT. We get labeled as, the gatekeepers, but yet we're always saying no. And so, because we're always saying no, it becomes this, well, they can't do anything. And the other way that I really think, what I tried to do is I really tried to help us correct and say, hey, let's have a much better customer service approach with those that we're working with at Scheels. And so, I really, simple perspective, let's start with by saying not necessarily no first, let's say yes or maybe, or let's start changing the script in Scheels IT with those people that work at Scheels. And so over the last year, we've spent a lot of time talking about customer service with those that we work with. How can we change this model? Well, through that journey, I've allowed our IT department to say, well, who is our customer? And we've said, well, our customer is the brick and mortar stores, right? Those Scheels associates, those people dressed in blue that you all are used to interacting with. We started to say, well, that's our customer. So let's give the brick and mortar stores good customer service. Let's really treat them how we would want to be treated as customers. Let's be more relevant to getting things done on time and all those customer service journeys. Well, the downside to that approach is that at the end of the day, if I'm treating other business units as our customers, then they're going to start to have this different level of expectation of me as a peer than they are as a customer. Meaning, if I call a brick and mortar store my customer, well, they're going to say, if the customer's always right, then whatever I ask for, you need to deliver, IT. Or they're going to have this idea of, well, I can go to iTunes and download an app. Why does it take you 9 months to deliver a project to us? And so while I think it helped us improve our customer service over the past year, I think this model of IT delivering things to the business through this method of you're our customer is flawed. And so really where we're headed is I want to surround the business units and really have them treat us as a peer, right? And so instead of us calling the brick and mortar stores our customers, they need to be viewed as peers to us. And it seems like a simple thing, but the reason why this is important as we kind of go through this for a few minutes this morning is the board looks at me and says, well, you came from the business side, you know what needs to be done, so get it done. And so if I allow them to say, well, you're my customer, let me serve you how I should serve, then whatever they need, I'm just going to end up delivering. And so I'm trying to now change this model and change it into a, no, you're our peer. Let's work through this together. Let's have a process together on which we approve projects together. Let's still work through that customer service perspective of we don't always have to say yes, but we can still help them evaluate through the perspective of no. And ultimately, the other reason why I think it's really important to kind of change this model is we're all in, we all have the exact same goal in mind, right? And that goal is to drive top line revenue. It's to improve customer service at Scheels for you guys, the customers, and it's ultimately to increase our retirement and our ESOP. And so we've got the same goals, so let's just be aligned together. So that's kind of my little soapbox on where I think I've made a mistake for the past year and how I'm trying to change that. But I think it's an important perspective for us all. When I came, I had no idea how projects were approved in IT. I had zero idea. You know, none. And so as I've been here, I've obviously learned that we have processes that we try to put in place for project approval. And that might be a governance process. You might have it be called a planning council or a steering committee, or it might be a governance model. And all of these groups or ideas are all geared for one reason in mind, and that's how do we get projects onto the list at IT, right? And that list is never ending. We're always trying to get things done. And really what we're shooting for is we're shooting for that stamp of approval in how do I get on IT's list? Never mind once you're on the list, how does it actually get done? But I think a lot of the business units or people that IT works with, they really struggle to understand how to get on the list at Scheels. I think these models are all really well intended, but I do feel like there's an inherent flaw in all of these groups. And I really think this flaw is that it creates way more red tape than we need. I think a lot of the reason why you're put in charge of whether that's a group of people, whether it's a server project, whether it's your PTA council, it's to make decisions and get things done. And I recognize that what I'm saying here isn't perfect, right? I recognize that we need others surrounded by us to help us have that connection to the business. I recognize that we need to have other stakeholders in our project. So I'm not saying you got to go it alone, but at the same time, what I've really recognized in a couple years is that these models are I sometimes feel like they're put in place for CYA, and I sometimes feel like they're put in place so that IT can continue to use this shadow of, well, you're not on the list, or, oh, the steering committee didn't approve that project, or the board didn't approve that project, when really, if it's something that needs to be done, and you as the leader, or you in charge of that project, or whatever it might be, if you recognize it needs to be done, you have to challenge yourself to fight through the red tape and say, you know what, we're going to make this happen. We're going to figure out how to make this happen. So I'm going to share a couple small examples at the end here of how I feel like with the people surrounded with me that we're trying to fight through this model of let's not be the traditional get it on the list, waterfall approach to development, and then deliver something 6 months later. Let's be much more relevant and be flexible to get things on the list and get things done and get them out in 2 or 3 weeks. I recognize that's not always going to be perfect, but I do think that some of the success that we've had is because we've been able to fight through this model. The key to success in IT is no different than the key to success in marketing, or in our case, the brick and mortar stores, or in your corporate office. It's all about the people, right? And there's a lot of good people in our IT department. We've got a small group, 25 folks in Scheels SIS, and a lot of good tenure in this group, a lot of really good people. So all these people were there before, but yet we were having really poor success from the board standpoint. So the difference is it's not just about the people, but it's about the right people. And in our department, there's 4 groups that make up our IT department. There's our point of sale side, which is the cash registers and all that infrastructure. There's our system admins, which maintain all the back of house servers and storage and email and all that stuff. There's our IBM I group, which is our developers. We still support and run an AS400 IBM I, and it's a very important part of our infrastructure at Scheels. And then the last group is our help desk, or our frontline support for, day in and day out users. We're a little different than most models, right? Because most of our people aren't at a desk 8 hours a day. Most of our people are on a sales floor. So our help desk is small, but it's still a very important part of our infrastructure. And so there's 4 people leading this group. And the 4 people, when I came in, two of them had 22 years of experience, one had 15 years of experience, and one had 14 years of experience. And so a lot of good tenure in the 4 leaders of these areas. But yet there was something really inherently wrong with IT's deliverability, and things were just not working well. It was obvious from day one what that problem was. One of those 4 people just was not working well with their coworkers. And I really think that there's pretty much, in my world, I evaluate 3 things when I look at a person. I look at their attitude, I look at their culture fit, and I look at their skill set. And you gotta have those 3 things nailed to be the right person at Scheels, right? You got to have a great attitude, and it's not just a happy attitude. In my world, it's an attitude that's committed to success, right? You don't have to be the A player, but if you're a role player, you still have to be committed to success. Culture, each of us have a unique culture in our businesses, and so you're going to have a little different things that are important to you culturally. But for me, there's some very specific things at Scheels that make us a little different, right? Like you probably know, all the men have to wear a shirt and tie. All the men have to be clean shaven. They can't have their hair on their collars. There's a lot of things about hustle and pace and urgency. You may know that Scheels has a bit of a conservative bend to it. And while that's not a requirement to work at Scheels, you have to, from a culture perspective, understand and accept that culture. And then there's the skill set piece. You have to have the capability to do your job. Well, this one individual that had been there for a long period of time obviously had these things at one point in their career. However, circumstances had changed such that personal changes in this associate's life had made it so that their attitude at work had changed significantly. The reason why I'm explaining all this background of this associate is that when you are working with a tenured associate and you have to make a change, for me, I think that's a very specific pattern that I work through with a tenured associate. And basically over the course of a year, I worked with this associate and I said, if you're going to be at Scheels, you need to enjoy coming to work every single day, right? And I think that's a very important thing for all of us, is that if you're going to go to work and spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day, every day, you don't have to love it, but boy, you got to enjoy being there, right? And this person, it was clear they hadn't enjoyed being there. And so the second part of a tenured associate is telling that associate that, you know what? If you don't want to be here, that's fine. I'm going to help you find another career. And you can have the freedom to tell people that. And I think it plays 2 really important aspects. One, it shows that you have a genuine concern for people. But the other thing that it does is it lets them know that they're not the most important thing there any longer, right? In IT, a lot of times when we have people that have been there 10, 12, 13 years, they really adopt this, well, I'm so important you can't get rid of me attitude. And by you telling them that, you know what, I'll help you transition if you want to transition, it lets them know that, hey, you know what, I'm not the most important thing here any longer. And so over the course of a year, I worked with this associate. This associate did choose to leave our employment, wished them well. Obviously, so as a result, now I've put a new person in place that is the right fit, attitude-wise, culture-wise, skill set-wise, and it has had a dramatic impact on our productivity in IT. And so there's no difference in IT from any other business unit at Scheels. People are the key, and the key is having the right people. The final thing about people that I think is really important is getting them the right seat on that bus, right? It's not just about having the right people, it's having the right people in the right role. And this isn't anything new. We've heard this forever. But, you know, as somebody that comes in from outside, you get that fresh set of eyes and that fresh perspective. You get to evaluate and really help and say, hey, is every person the right person here? And are they in the right role? All the success we've had at Scheels, or in IT at Scheels, is all due to the people, is all due to them being the right people in the right roles. We had an associate, same kind of deal. When I came in, he fit attitude and culture-wise, but his skill set was not right for the role they had him in. So we just worked to make a change. He's now gone from being a C player associate, you know, to being that mid-level role player associate. He's never going to be an A player, but he's now on the right seat in the bus. And it has made all the difference in that associate's career path, and it's also made all the difference in our productivity in that area that associate works. So, two, I think, really small segments. After you get the right people, I think the next key for me is you got to have a goal. You got to have a direction that you're taking your group or your department. And so I got this short little video I want to play. I want you to think about this in two aspects. I want you to think about this personally, because I think we do talk about personal goals when it comes to weight loss and health and those kind of things. But I think sometimes in our professional lives in IT, some of us, it's easy to lose sight of having a goal, a specific measurable goal that you're trying to accomplish. And I'm not talking about projects, right? We've always got project goals that we're trying to accomplish. But do you have a specific goal that you're trying to accomplish? So let's take a look at this.
Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. All right?
All right.
You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.
You might never fail on the scale I did, but some failure in life is inevitable. It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default.
I didn't get the job. But here's the thing. I didn't quit. I didn't fall back. I walked out of there to prepare for the next audition, and the next audition, and the next audition. I prayed.
But what is most important is that you have to dig deep down and ask yourselves, who do you want to be? Not what, but who.
With a whale, out of handcuffed lightning, throw thunder and things. bedroom, hit the switch, was in the bed before the room was dark. Incredible. Fast. Incredible. You, George Foreman, all of you chumps are gonna bow when I whoop him. All of you. I know you got him. I know you got him picked, but the man's in trouble. I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's gonna win that inch. And I know if I'm gonna have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is.
Never give in. Never, never, never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy.
Something, go get it. Period.
So I love that they have rugby highlights in that, right? I like what he says at the end there, if you want something, go get it. So, kind of taking a little different angle than I think we're used to hearing at IT Talks here normally, but to me, there is no question that you gotta have a goal that you're trying to accomplish. I think part of that goal, if you're gonna make a difference in your career, in your area of supervision, I think you gotta be willing to live outside the lines and make some mistakes sometimes, right? I think my background here kind of set me up for this, so if I go way back, first grade through 12th grade, I got suspended every single year I was in school. Now, maybe the Billings guys can relate. I grew up in Billings, so maybe we're just a little different out there, but I think the reason that's important is I didn't get in trouble for being mean or being a bad kid. I got in trouble for having way too much energy, right? Today, they would have definitely put me on some kind of a drug to keep me calm. But what those suspensions taught me early was that, you know what, when you make mistakes, there's consequences. But the other thing about mistakes or going outside the lines is it means you're going to make a difference. It means you're going to stand out. And while those areas in my grade school youth were areas I probably didn't want to stand out in, today I recognize that, you know what, if I'm going to make a difference, I got to be willing to stand out. I got to be willing to take a chance and make a difference. I really like what Rowling quoted there. Failure in life is inevitable unless you live so cautiously that you might not as well lived at all. If you think about that in our business environments, in our roles, if you're so cautious that you don't make any mistakes, then what's the point in being in that role in a leadership position at all? And so you have to be willing to make some mistakes, right? I definitely look and I evaluate when I'm willing to make a mistake. Is it going to be a minor infraction or is it going to be a major infraction? If you decide to speed, are you going to get a ticket or are you going to get your driver's license taken away? At work, am I going to get a verbal correction or am I going to get fired? And so I think when you're taking the risk, you definitely have to say, hey, what's the chance of this risk being major or what's the chance of this risk being minor? So a couple other cool things from that video, I thought. The part where they talk about inch by inch, right? This isn't a one big milestone. You got to come to work and work on that goal every single day. You got to try to make a difference every single day that you're working towards that progression. So I want to talk about a couple examples. These are very simple examples, but I hope that you'll see kind of the thread when I'm talking about being willing to make a mistake or go outside of the white lines. We've had a wireless voice infrastructure at Scheels for a long time, since about 2005 actually. But we never had a wireless data infrastructure. We just didn't have any need for data wirelessly. We just didn't have anything to do with it. So about a year ago, we finally decided, hey, we've got some functionality that we can use a wireless device for. So we went out and we said, here's how we're going to use these devices. At Scheels, expense control is very, very important to us. Any F&E expense over $1,000, we actually have to go get board approval for. So that's a pretty low number in our world, right? So we went to the board and we said, hey, we've got this new project. We think it's going to have a significant impact on some back-of-house operations. Would you approve a pilot project for these devices? And the board said, yeah, we'll approve that. These devices were $1,800 a piece. So not a significant expense, but yet still enough that we had to get the board to approve it. So we bought just 2 of them. We put them in one store and we started piloting the project. Had a couple, not really bumps, but just had some workflow things we worked out with the associates. After about 2 weeks, it was clear that this was going to be a successful project, that it was having a significant impact, that the associates were using it well, that the technology behind it was going to work, the device was a good choice. And so at that time, the end users said, we need more devices. Well, at $1,800 a piece, that's a lot of money if you don't have that budgeted, or if you have to go back to the board. And so they actually wanted 6 more devices. Rather than go back to the board, I just said, hey, you know what? Let's just go ahead and buy these devices today. I looked at it, I said, let's take the risk, quote unquote risk. Even though I knew it was probably going to be approved, I said, this is an area where I don't want to slow down momentum of a successful project. And I think that's really important. I think when we deliver things in IT, sometimes we are too cautious and pull the reins back. When you're having success with something, really capitalize on that momentum and let it roll. That might be a relationship with a vendor where you've started a new partnership with a vendor and you're cautiously walking into it. If you're having success, man, figure out how to keep that momentum going and let it go really fast. So we bought a few more devices. Like I said, we increased it about 200%. We bought 6 more. And that went tremendous, really well done. We're now into the second phase of this project where we're using a little different device, a smaller device. Going to give them some additional functionality in the software development of it. The other thing, and this is kind of stepping outside of the lines of getting in trouble. The other thing that I've noticed that we do in IT is sometimes we will build a project at the beginning with too many requirements and too much future-looking capabilities. And what I mean here is in this second phase, we're now going to put a device in every associate's hands in the back of house area. So we're purchasing another 150 devices. So in the course of a year, we've gone from 0 wireless devices to almost 200. And yet, we chose to purposely do some things that we knew we didn't have in place. We did not do any sort of an MDM when we rolled out the first devices. We knew we were going to give out a wireless device and yet have no real way to support that device. Now when we're going from 30 to 200, now's the right time for IT to come back and say, hey, how are we going to support these and treat these like any other device within our environment? Again, sometimes I think IT, I saw it when I first came in and I still see it occasionally. We want to do every single scope scenario possible. I think that's important, but I think sometimes that really stifles us from getting things done. I think we want to do too many things up front, and we should just, you know what, let's get it out into the business, let's get it out into the user's hands, let's have it be successful, and then let's make sure before we go to the whole enterprise that we've got all those things that IT needs to have in place. So I know that's kind of against the traditional, hey, let's make sure it's going to be successful from day one model. But you know what? I would rather get things out there and have things be successful right away than spend 6 months or 9 months of IT developing something when I can go to the App Store and download something today, right? That whole model's a little different. So kind of a little soapbox there in mind that I really challenge my team. I say, hey, you know what? Let's get stuff in production first and evaluate the risk of it not going well. Another project that we worked on is we do a fair amount of off-site events at Scheels, and they're definitely becoming more and more prevalent. The most common one that you guys would be familiar with is the marathon, where they set up the big expo on the floor of the Fargo Dome, and they sell all that merchandise. Well, our old model was we would always have to ship a server, we'd ship a register. It was actually run on DOS. We actually just retired it a couple months ago. So this has been around for a long time. And what the business said is, hey, you know what? We need a little bit better capabilities, meaning we need real-time inventory. We want the sales to ring up instantly. We want the receipt to be the same receipt the customer would use in the store, regardless if they weren't in the store. And so that was the project. We worked down the project line. We basically had this model where we were going to say, we're going to have a wireless router from Cisco that's going to use the Verizon cell towers. That's going to provide the network, and then we'll just plug the register into that network, and we'll run the register. Worked great. No issues at all. Concept was perfect. Business side was super happy with it. We started with a 3G router from Verizon. What ended up happening was when we would go to the events, and the first event where we ran into an issue was in Omaha at the College World Series. the router did not have when the event would get full, meaning 15, 18,000 people around, the cell towers would lose connection, just like your cell phone loses connection to a Verizon tower when you're in the Fargo Dome, you can't get reception. The same thing was happening with our routers. And so we had to add in another router, a 4G router. That worked much better. However, we still had those density issues. And so then we had to add in a third router, a wired option at these locations. The story here is that same kind of scenario where the board has to approve every specific F&E purchase at Scheels. We didn't go back to the board and say, hey, will you approve this? Will you approve this? Will you approve this? We knew the board had already approved the project. The board and the stores were saying, we need more of these devices. This is working really well. So we just went out and bought what was necessary to make the project successful. Again, I have to account for that on the back end, which, again, in these examples, it is simplistic. But I use the same model with other things. You know, if we're putting in place a $20,000 server for whatever, if there's decisions that need to be made on the fly that impact that project, I'm going to evaluate the risk and I'm going to say, well, is the board likely to approve this, yes or no? And if they don't, what are the consequences going to be of my making that decision or somebody on my team that I've empowered to make that decision be? And so, again, capitalizing on the momentum, putting the right tools in place. The third example that I want to share this morning is relationships with vendors, I think, are extremely important to our success in IT. Our hand got forced by Nike 2 years ago in how we were submitting orders to Nike. And we were faxing in everything. It's just the way we've always done fax. If we were going to order something from Nike, we'd send them a fax and they'd fulfill it and send it back. And so we did that with all our vendors. We have about 3,000 vendors that we do business with at Scheels. But Nike said, hey, you know what? We're not going to take faxes anymore. You got to go to our website, order product. And so that led us into having to do EDI, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. And so what the board said is, okay, IT department, what we want you to do is we want you to do EDI for Nike, Under Armour, and Columbia. And that was the project. That was the scope. Well, as we got into it, I recognized that, hey, you know, if we're going to do just 3 vendors, why don't we do more? So we went from 3 vendors to 500 vendors outside of the board scope. And then I also recognized that, you know what, if we're going to take all the time and effort to do the purchase order, why don't we do some of the other things that EDI allows us to do? Why don't we add in other documents like the invoice or the shipment acknowledgement? And so the group of us that were working on this, we decided to expand the scope beyond what the board had said. But we chose to do it because we recognized it was going to have a tremendous business impact. And so, you know, there was definitely a risk to that. There was a little bit of an increased cost, but it was more of that scope creep that we all try to avoid. I think sometimes, you know what, if you recognize that it's going to have a tremendous impact, I think it's okay to go ahead and increase the scope of your project if you can do all those other things, right? Get it done, deliver what needs to be done, make the difference. So same thing, you know, it ties into a lot of other areas that we do with, but sometimes scope creep is okay as long as you look and analyze the risk. The last one that I just want to talk about is I think we still make mistakes all the time, and I think we're still too hesitant to be willing to take risks as a team. We currently don't run the website, meaning we have a different group. We took that out of IT. IT used to run it. If you've been to Scheels.com, I hope that you are pleased with its performance for the most part. But does anybody have a big complaint with Scheels.com today? If there was one thing you could pick that we would improve, does anybody have something they'd improve? Thanks, Brad. That's the one. Thank you. I appreciate it. He said he wishes we had more inventory, right? The biggest challenge we're faced with on Scheels.com, it is not a representation of our brick and mortar stores. You know, the brick and mortar stores have 600, 700,000 products in them. Scheels.com currently has right around 50,000 products. We need to increase the scope of the product count online. There's no question about it. So the leader of the website had a conversation with the board last month, and he said, "Board, what do you want me to do next year?" And the board said, "You know what, things are going pretty well. Why don't you just keep the ship going as it is?" So that's what he's going to do. Yet he could figure out ways to increase the product count on Scheels.com dramatically without increasing spend, without doing things, if he's willing to take the risk and make it happen. And you know what? If he was to increase the product count on Scheels.com, his career would be impacted tremendously for the positive, right? He would have to be willing to take that risk and say, you know what, we're going to figure out how to make this happen. And it's not an easy thing. I recognize, boy, if you want to put product online, it is not easy to take old inventory descriptions and make them ready for e-commerce. So it is not an easy thing to do. But boy, if he wanted to change his career path or the perception of Scheels.com, he could make it happen. He just has to be willing to take the risk. And from the board's perspective, what would the board care? Meaning, if top-line revenue continues to increase and the website's stable, the board doesn't care how many products are online, right? So a simple example of, I think, sometimes where I think we're still too hesitant as people to set a goal and go for it and accomplish it. How do I know that what we've been doing at Scheels in the IT department is working? You know, really what I talked about this morning is the people, the connection with the business, setting a goal and being willing to take some risks. You know, we're hearing a lot of ancillary comments about ever since you came, IT changed. Well, again, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's all about the people in our department. The board has a lot of restored confidence. You know, that's a pretty powerful comment that I think we all want to hear. The approval project, or the approval process for projects is much easier with the board. You know, those purse strings are a lot looser than they used to be. And the final one that I think will really tell the tale of how we're doing is, what is the end user satisfaction or perception of IT? Last year when we did a first ever kind of evaluation of IT, they graded us at 56% approval, basically is how I would term that. That's pretty terrible, right? And so it'll be fun this year, well, hopefully fun. It will be good to see this year what the results are. You know, I expect, you know, we were shooting for about a double-digit increase. So, you know, I'm shooting for somewhere around 65%, which is still a very low number, but it would show tremendous growth in basically a year. So, again, I don't claim to be perfect, and I think we still have a long way to go, but we've definitely had some positive results in the first year. So, a lot of theoretical stuff, a lot of stuff that's just talking about me and how we've done. Does anybody have any questions this morning that I could answer or attempt to perfect. I'll take the silence as a no. So thank you. I appreciate it.